Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into an analysis that makes a pretty bold claim that one of Australia's biggest political parties is basically collapsing from the inside out. And if it's true, this could completely shake up the country's political scene. So, yeah, let's get right into it.
So the whole thing kicks off with this really dramatic statement. And the source argues that the recent state election in South Australia, well, that's like the canary in the coal mine. It's the first big warning sign that something much, much bigger is happening under the surface.
Okay, so when you look at those election results, two things really jump out. First, a pretty decisive win for the Labour Party. But the second story, and this is the one the source says we should all be watching, was this huge surge for the One Nation Party. They're calling it a new orange wave, and it could be a real game changer.
So what does all this mean? Well, according to this analysis, the election results in one state aren't the real story. They're just a symptom of something way bigger, a massive fight for the very soul of the conservative movement in Australia.
And for the Liberal Party, this wasn't just, a bad night at the polls. The source argues this loss was a long time coming. It's the end result of a massive identity crisis that's been kind of eating away at the party from the inside for years.
And what's at the absolute core of this identity crisis? It boils down to one really damaging label, the idea that the party has just become Labour Light.
Yeah, Labour Light. The source quotes commentator Corey Bernardi, who really hits the nail on the head. Voters see them as basically the same thing, a Uniparty, as he calls it. And the big problem is, if you're a traditional conservative voter, where do you go? The argument is the Liberals just aren't offering a real alternative anymore.
And this isn't just a feeling, right? The analysis points to some pretty concrete examples. You've got liberal governments passing socially progressive laws on things like abortion and hate speech. You've got key leaders at the federal level being called leftists. And for the party's traditional base, especially Christian voters, these moves are a huge turnoff. It feels like a betrayal.
And this gets to the heart of the strategic problem, doesn't it? It's like when you try to be everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to anyone. The source argues that by moving to the center to try and win over progressive voters, the Liberals have they've failed on both fronts. Their conservative base feels left behind, and the progressive voters, they already have a party. It's called the Labour Party.
So you got to ask, what's the root cause of all this? How did they get here? The analysis digs deep and points the finger at the party's foundational philosophy, this idea of the broad church.
Now, the whole broad church idea, it's this model where you try to have a huge tent, right? You welcome everyone from moderates to strong conservatives. And for a long time, that was their secret sauce, their greatest strength. But the argument we're looking at today says that very same model has now become their biggest weakness, their fatal flaw.
Here's why. The party is basically split right down the middle into two warring camps. You've got the moderates on one side, who the source claims are so progressive they're practically like the Greens, and then you have the traditional conservatives on the other. And these two groups, they are in a constant, simmering civil war.
And the result of all this infighting is, it's total chaos. The analysis says that whenever a conservative tries to lead, they're immediately undermined by the moderate faction, with constant leaks to the media. The party can't get a clear message out because it's too busy fighting with itself. They're literally eating themselves alive.
Now, what's really interesting is how the source contrasts this with the Labour Party. I mean, let's be real. Labour has factions too. Of course they do. But the difference is one word: discipline. They are ruthless about staying on message and presenting a united front, while the Liberals just seem completely paralyzed by all their public squabbling.
So how does Labour pull this off? Well, the report claims it's pretty simple. If you step out of line, there are consequences. It points to the example of Claire Scriven, a pro-life minister. After she voted her conscience on an issue, she was suddenly demoted to a spot on the ticket that was almost impossible to win from. The message was crystal clear: dissent will be punished.
Okay, so while the Liberal Party is busy with all this internal drama, nature abhors a vacuum, right? Another political party is stepping right into that void, and they are benefiting big time from all this chaos.
And that party is One Nation. They are just scooping up all those alienated conservative voters. I mean, winning their first ever lower house seats in South Australia? That's a huge deal. It shows they're becoming a real force to be reckoned with.
And it seems like One Nation's leader, Pauline Hanson, has been taking notes. She's looked at what's happening to the Liberals and has come out and said flat out, my party will never have factions. She's determined not to fall into that same broad church trap that causes so much internal division.
But, and this is a big but, as One Nation gets more popular, the analysis raises a really critical question. Are they really the solution that these unhappy conservative voters are looking for?
Because the potential problem with One Nation, according to this source, isn't about factions. It's something else entirely, and it might be even more worrying. Candidate vetting. Basically, who are the people they're putting up for election?
To make this point, the analysis zeroes in on one of their brand new MPs in South Australia, a guy named Jason Vercoe.
Now, on the surface, this looks like a huge win for the party. But when you dig a little deeper into his political past, something pops up that the source says should be a massive red flag for conservative voters. And honestly, it's a bit of a twist.
It turns out he used to be a federal election candidate for, wait for it, the Sex Party. Yeah, a party whose platform is described as pretty much the polar opposite of social conservatism. So this raises some pretty big questions, not just about his own personal beliefs, but more importantly, about how carefully One Nation is checking the people who run under their banner.
So, let's just recap what this analysis is saying. You've got this political landscape with three major players, each with its own huge problem. Labor has to keep its iron grip to stop factions from breaking out. The Liberals are stuck in this broad church identity crisis, tearing themselves apart. And One Nation might not have factions, but it's got some serious questions about its candidates. It really seems like the biggest threat to these parties isn't each other, but themselves.
Which leaves us with this one big lingering question. If the old broad church model for conservative politics is collapsing, what's going to be built in its place? According to this source, the future on the right of Australian politics is completely up for grabs. It's uncertain, and it's probably going to be a messy, hard-fought battle for a long, long time.